All right. Welcome everybody to Aftercamp. This is actually part of our developer relations series. Super excited about that. So last month we welcomed Michael from AWS. This month I am super excited about who we have. We have Joe Karlsson from SingleStore. This is cool because Joe has got a hell of a personality, and definitely I think personally, like, Joe is one of those guys that I look up to on LinkedIn. I'm like, dude, this dude's slamming content. And what's funny about it, I was thinking about this too. Like, I think we've been like talking for like about a year, and this is like the first time I've actually actually talked to you.
I was thinking that same thing this morning too.
It's creepy. Creepy is the wrong word, but it's definitely the internet has changed a lot of things. So
it's been a weird couple of years.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And hopefully we get to meet in real life too, and you can see how creepy I am in real life as well.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite things about your videos too is just the backgrounds. I love looking at all your stuff.
Thank you. Good. Yeah. I built this wall specifically for YouTube though. It's blurry right now, but I'd see here if I can get it. The YouTube wall. You gotta.
Yeah. No, I get it. Well, I'm like, we're still settling in our new place. I'm like, okay, how do I get my camera just like be blurred the right way and get like a nice little accent thing going? I get it. I understand. Okay, so tonight we are chatting about the past, the present, and the future of databases. And I am confident that this conversation could either stay completely on track or and be incredibly valuable, or go completely off the rails and be incredibly valuable. So I'm excited to see.
I encourage both paths.
Yeah, I'm excited to see which way it goes. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to you, Joe. Take it away, good sir.
I love it. First, I just want to set some ground rules here with everybody too. First of all, I'm keeping an eye on the chat over here. Scott is going to help me out too. If you have any questions or whatever, I don't have a thing. I'm just going to talk about some stuff for a little bit. And then, I don't know, whatever. Just ask me questions. It's fine. It doesn't have to be what we're talking about. It can be about whatever. Let's see here. Also, other question, if you could just post in the chat where you're from too. I hear there's a lot of Minneapolis people. I'm assuming a lot of Prime folks are kind of in the nebulous zone here too, which would be amazing. But just let me know where you're from the chat. Love to keep an eye. Oh, Roseville. Roseville, by the way, my favorite suburb of the Twin Cities. Don't tell anybody, but it's my favorite. Fuck Edina. It's in Roseville. That's where the action's at. The other thing, I'll just give a quick little intro, who I am. So I'm Joe Karlsson. I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Currently reside here. I don't know. I'll give the fast version of my career. I started a computer science major. I went to Gustavus Adolphus College in St. Peter. I hated it. I sucked at it. And then got a job doing SharePoint consulting during the Steve Ballmer years, which I also hated and was really boring for me. I moved to Hawaii with the intention of giving up programming forever and becoming a surf bum. And I ended up getting involved with the surfer hacker punk community out there. We just started making art and started getting involved with programming and started teaching out there. That's where I got involved. And I became the lead technical instructor at one of the top 10 best developer boot camps in the world, Dev League. I don't know if they still are, but we were there. We were top 10 on Switch Up at the time. I did that for a while. Great. I got paid peanuts. I don't know if you know anything about Hawaii. It's very expensive. So I ended up moving back home to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and got a job at Best Buy. Within 6 months, I was promoted to be this technical lead for the front end of BestBuy.com. I did some really cool stuff over there. Proud of the work we did. We re-architected for this little thing called Black Friday, a scalable front-end architecture, which was really fun. So I got really good at building huge, massive, scalable web applications. And at that time too, BestBuy.com was the third largest e-commerce site behind Amazon and Walmart. So we're just dealing with massive amounts of scale, which is super fun. Next up, that's when I started getting into public speaking and writing and streaming and writing and whatever. And my boss got mad at me because I was doing that more often than working. And I said, okay, that's totally fine, but I'm going to leave and I'm going to go figure out how to do this full time. So that's when I met MongoDB. And I started working there for a couple of years as a developer advocate over there. And then did that for a couple of years. And then just a couple of months ago, I switched over to a startup, which I've never really done before. It's called SingleStore, which is in the database space too. I don't know if anyone's looking for a new job, but I got a 67% pay increase by job hopping right now. It's still a really good time to look around. I encourage you to do that. Even if take it, will accidentally make it a better offer, who knows? But I had good outcomes with it this year too. So anyways, that's the short-ish version of my thing. I make a lot of TikTok videos. I love tweeting, and I just gave a TED Talk a couple weeks ago or months ago. I don't know. It was a while ago. Okay, that's it. It's so nice to meet everyone here. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I kind of like fell into this database space. Oh my gosh, I see Australia. Wow, lots of okay, Kansas City, Minnesota's, Argentina. Yeah, we're like all over the place here. I love it. A lot of Midwest and like everywhere else. That's amazing. Okay, I would love to connect with everyone. I'm going to post my links on all my socials. I would love to connect with everybody too. On LinkedIn, whatever, Twitter, whatever you're at. Okay, cool. So database space. I kind of fell into the database space. And I've been here for a couple of years because, like I said, I made the transition from front-end architecture and like front-end development at Best Buy and then into the database space. And even like when I was doing front-end development, it was all like stateless front-end components that aren't maintaining any state in a database. And like, I still can't believe that MongoDB hired me to do database stuff, having no experience there. But I think that's like the key, right, of like just showing you can learn new stuff. I was able to be picked up by them, which is really wonderful. But the other thing that I think is really cool about the database space too, that is, it's not like the part that people think about very often, but data, like the data we save is one of the most critical parts of our application, right? Like that's the lifeblood of our applications, and data is only becoming increasingly more common and more needed. I just saw here recently, I was looking up like total data usage. So like this year, 2021, it was 79, it's estimated that 79 zettabytes of data was used this year. And if you don't know what a zettabyte is, it is, what did I look at? It's equal to 1 billion terabytes. So that's just like this year estimated. And in 4 years from now, in 2025, it's estimated that we're gonna have 181 zettabytes of data usage, which I think is like over 2 times the total data usage. Like it's just exponentially growing. Like the key there is like data is one of those like super important things that you may or may not think about, and like it's only going to become more and more pressing. And like it's not like data becomes less important as developers. It's only become more important, which is like made sense for like my career to kind of double down and focus on databases as like a weird specialty niche. Yeah, which I didn't really. I'm like still learning a lot about databases. Okay, cool. Let's see here. Data and stuff. Okay, so like databases have been around for forever, right? Like we've been maintaining data without databases in the form of written records forever. And then through like the 1910s through 1960s, we did have some basic computer systems, and all of the data that was saved in there was saved in punch cards. I know a lot of early programming languages are punch card based, but like that's how we maintain data. And we also had like systems like the Dewey Decimal System for saving data or whatever, right? Like saving data and organizing it in meaningful ways is like very human, especially as like we start saving and utilizing more data. And also fun fact too, the file systems that we use today on pretty much every, or at least all Unix-based systems, was invented in the 1950s. And it's been like, that's what, I mean, the entire Unix operating systems are based on the file system. It's funny too, seeing like the analogs that we name them off after to like understand them, like be abstracted away to like it not matter anymore. Like I was just reading a thing about Gen Z kids not understanding that the save icon on like Microsoft Word is like a floppy disk. It's kind of like outgrown its like it's why we still use that term, which I think is fascinating. Anyways, and anyone know what year? You can let me know in the chat. The relational database system was invented. Anyone know? I will say there is a research paper it is based on. I will actually share it in there. It is interesting to kind of see the paper that it's based on. I'll post that in chat there, but it was in the 1970s. So 1970 was the year that the relational database system was actually invented by a computer scientist named Edgar F. Codd, and it's one of the most important papers that's ever been written about data ever. It's been the foundation of how we've been saving and persisting data for what years? It's like 50 years now we've been using this model. for saving data. It's, I mean, massively important. How many things in tech have like lasted 50 years? It's not many. It's not many. Minor sidebar too. I like studying things that have a long shelf life. I think are a really good use, or like very useful for your career. Like chasing after shiny tech is really great and awesome, but like it usually is pretty ephemeral. Like studying things like data structures, algorithms, databases, SQL, like even like Unix tooling can be like really useful for longevity or career. You know what I mean? Instead of like investing in things that might be around for longer than 2 years or whatever.
Well, yeah, and like I feel like just in general too, like just you know, I think it's easy with modern ideas like you know, all these new technologies, all these new front-end technologies coming out, like React and Angular and you know, Next and all these other things, and then you look at something like the solid principles, and you look at, you know, things like design patterns. And what I feel like it happens sometimes is you don't realize that some of that stuff is actually already in play, and the systems that you're, these frameworks that you're using actually like do employ these, or they like. Node is a great example. Like love Node. Node is a phenomenal technology, but it does require that you understand, you know, like solid can be applied to Node and make it really, really valuable. And so I love that idea of just like studying. Like I like this paper too, by the way. It's got that really like old printy feel to it.
It looks like they just scanned it in.
Yeah, it's super great. So I'm already excited to read this tonight.
It's a little dense. It's definitely, I mean, computer science is definitely like a mathy discipline, but like it's cool. Like I skimmed this earlier today again, just gonna get a refresher on it, and I had to Google a lot of the words in it to figure out what was going on with it. But it's still fun to look at. Yeah. Okay, so okay, great. All right, we're just gonna. I don't know. This part is like. I think so. We use SQL, obviously, or SQL and RDBMSs, or relational database management systems. We're still using to this day, but 1980s through today is kind of the rise of SQL. And then in the 90s, we start seeing the advent of the internet, right? So the internet comes up, and we start formulating how to build these web applications. Obviously, they persist data long term, and I kind of call this like phase one of data on the web. And these websites are typically just using like client server database systems. And the data is being accessed just on like usually single vertically scaled instances of the database. I don't know if anyone knows how like databases is also key for destroying most of the early web properties that you're aware of. And Friendster died was that they weren't able to scale their databases up and became too slow to scale. MySpace had similar issues. And in my humble opinion, Facebook's database architecture is the reason why they were able to scale and become as dominant as they are today. And if anyone knows how they were scaled, like what they did differently than anyone else, it's related to how they rolled out Facebook at an early stage. And they did that by, if you remember, they did it college by college. And what they did is they had a single database per college, and they were able to scale those up independently. So they weren't able to have like the massive issues they had with Friendster, with all the data, all the servers, all the different users sharing the same servers. But yeah, that's why they were able to scale, and they weren't able to go down. It's probably due to their database. Yeah, exactly. Rachel just talked about she was excited when they added the college that she went to. Yes, I remember that too.
There's this really great video online. I'll find it after this talk. It's like Mark Zuckerberg walking in to a CS class, and there's like 6 people, and like Facebook is just getting started, and he's like in his like jacket, and he's this guy's hands in his pocket, and he's like, I don't know, what do you guys want to talk about? It's like they ended up talking about data, and they ended up recording it, throwing the recording on it. And then so it's interesting too to even hear him talk about how they did that. It's really, really fascinating. I'll find it and dig it up. And
I would love to watch that too. It's key, obviously, like, and even like for all, I mean, data's been one of the, there's 2 things that are like the biggest bottlenecks for most applications that they scale to a certain point, and it's usually database latency. Query speeds start tanking, and it can really affect, that becomes the bottleneck for entire application. And Facebook has been really smart about mitigating that too, and Google has too, obviously. Cool. And let's see here. Okay, cool. So that's like phase one, right? So we're vertically scaling up single instances of these SQL databases. And then phase two is kind of and I'd say that is from like the 2010s to 2017. It's kind of the NoSQL movement databases. If you don't know, NoSQL doesn't really have anything, but frequently it gets cited as being not only SQL. Basically, it's throwing out SQL as like the primary interface we have for interacting with our databases. And the goal was to achieve greater speed and scale.
Пришла.
Oh, I think I missed that. I don't know if that was a mistake mute or something, but
I got it. You're good. You're muted. Go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah. We started seeing some really specialized early like databases like Bigtable, Redis, Neo4j, MongoDB for like document stores, timescale stuff or time series databases, Bigtable. I don't know if I mentioned that too. MapReduce databases. But like reinventing what that looks like for being able to scale. And it became a meme in like 2010. Like MongoDB as web scale became a meme for a little bit too. There's big hype around a lot of these applications. They may or may not have been able to hit them. And we're kind of, in my experience too, NoSQL became really huge. They had big promises. It didn't quite hit them, and we've kind of tempered them out. I feel like both SQL and NoSQL databases are kind of learning from each other and like becoming better for it today. But they've kind of tempered out. Like, I mean, any new tech, there's usually massive hype around it. Like blockchain, I think is the most recent one that we've had. Massive explosion of interest and kind of tempering expectations until it evens out again.
Well, it's funny you say that too, is I really feel like Mongo, once it's so dumb too, because like once we got the acronym mean stack, and I feel oh my gosh, I feel like everything was Mongo, like that was like 2014, 2013.
Yeah.
And I feel like, boot camps are also rising at that same time too.
Yeah.
And so, gosh, the first boot camps are earmarked at 2013. And Prime got started technically 2014, but our first cohort was 2015.
Yeah.
And I just remember the sheer amount of students coming out of programs that had Mongo was like crazy at that point. And so
you're totally right. Yeah, absolutely. And that's when I was teaching too, was like 2014 to 2016. Yep. And MongoDB was a huge part of our curriculum too.
But since then, I feel like I don't want to call it regression because I don't think it's completely fair based off what you said.
Yeah, I agree.
It's like all of a sudden we're going back to like parent stack, where we're using Postgres, we're using SQL based. And so I love that idea of them learning off each other.
Oh, totally. I mean, we see like PostgreSQL is using JSON blob storage and time series data, and now it's easier to horizontally scale your database, and like all these important lessons are kind of being shared and adopted and grown in different ways. I think that's not a bad thing. That's just like making everyone better, Okay, cool. I want to talk like briefly about like the modern era, and then I want to talk about like my ideas of like where the database market is going, like just based on my own understanding of where things at too. And plus, this is being recorded too, so that part's fun, so everyone can watch this in 5 years, and we can all have a good laugh at how wrong I was about predicting the future. But it's still fun. It's still fun. Okay, cool. So let's talk about the modern era. So the NoSQL era, I think really starts to obviously from 2010 to 2017, but I think from 2017 to about today, we start seeing like a quote unquote modern era of databases. I think if you go to any database website right now, they're going to claim they're a modern database. There's no like rhyme or reason for what that means. But in my humble experience, a modern database is one that it can handle real-time data, some like massively handling real-time data flows, data pipelines. It's distributed across multiple shards, typically different nodes. It's not a single instance anymore. It's multi-cloud, so it's not just stuck on a single cloud. It can handle multi-model, which would mean like it can handle relational data, document data, time series data, graph data, like row and like columnar data. I don't know if I said that right. Basically scalability and flexibility, I think, are key for and cloud is key for modern databases. Okay, cool. Let's see. I'm just gonna check in. Oh my gosh, Kent's here. Amazing.
There is a one question, and I think this is actually, we could probably spend even a little bit of time talking about this one.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. So the question is, how should we choose the correct DB? And what are some key indicators? And what's funny is that I work in nerdery. So we work with clients, and I have basically as big a client as you possibly could get, and work on 2 projects for them. And one, slam dunk, we know exactly what we're using. But the other one, we're like actually waiting for the design to evolve a little bit more. There's this really important point that we brought it up in one of the older Aftercamps, and I think you talked around it. I just want to like just get this,
slam it.
Hit this one home. Is that I feel personally like applications start at the data model, not at like because most like, you know, UX will come in and they do their thing, and you know they got their goals, but once we know what the goals of the application should be from like the human side, like before we start modeling or architecting anything, we like look at that data model and be like, what do we need? And like not only what do we need now, but like what do we need in the future? And I think that like the best solution kind of emerges out of that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, man, on like just what, like I'm starting an application, what do I pick? You know?
Yeah, no, I love that. You know, I think and it's so tricky too, because I think there's a lot of marketing bullshit out there too about how every database is going to be the silver bullet that's going to solve all the needs to your application. And there's really no way to know up front either. All you can do is really like, you could do some testing with some like sample like data structures or like sample data you might be working with and trying to scale it up and see if it works. But really, I mean, like who's got the time for that? Especially if you're like running a startup or just like building an application on your own. So it still really depends. I'm going to be like the dream I have for future databases is that we genuinely won't have to guess that. Like if it is like a true multi-model database that could flip those effortlessly and have it like handle that for us, that'd be amazing. We're not there yet. We still have to give a shit about what that looks like and what databases we're using. The answer is it depends, which is boring. But like, I would still be going for databases that I think, well, okay, there's a lot of things like CAP theorem is one of the big things. Consistency, oh shit, what does the A stand for? Availability and, I'm forgetting what the P stands for. Whatever. But like choosing what we want to have on there. Someone can let me know in the comments. Give that a Google for me. I can't believe I forgot what CAP theorem is. But it's like choosing like what you need your database to be. Like, do I need to be available? Consistency, yep, perfect. Availability and partition. Yeah, you're able to partition it out. And that basically has to do with like these are what CAP theorem basically says is like you get to pick 2 of those. And you have to pick out what you need. So like, for example, let's say I'm designing a Twitter-like service. That one, it's going to be really read heavy because a single tweet is going to be read. Like if I have a Kim Kardashian, it could be read, millions of times. And it's less important to me to have consistency on that platform because like if the order is slightly out of date or you don't see it right away, that's okay. Like it's not critical that we have a consistent tweet timeline experience for everybody on there. So that for them, like that those choices make sense for that. But maybe a different example is you're building an IoT application. That one's going to be really write heavy and you're going to be doing lots of analytics on that data. So consistency is really important. You want to have real-time data flows on that. That's an entirely different use case that really like would change the needs of your database. You want to make sure it can handle massively ingestible data and you're able to make quick queries from that data set, that only take seconds to minutes instead of hours to days to run those queries, right? It depends. Also, the other thing I think people don't talk about enough too is like culture, data culture. So like, let's say, for example, you're at a company who is like super into SQL. You have like 100 SQL database engineers there. Like pulling in a MongoDB type database actually may be a bad choice just because like engineers aren't trained to use that and they may be strongly opposed to it too. TLDR is there's no right reason and there's so many different ways to evaluate it, but like it really depends on the unique needs of your application and then trying to figure out what those are. Graph databases, MapReduce databases, key value stores, consistency within different databases, which usually can be configured these days too. But
well, I feel like as this data empire expands too, and we like are thinking about all these things, I feel like the other one that I'm seeing get a ton of rise too is like the data engineering discipline is like exploding right now. It's like, I feel like even if you get it wrong, if you have somebody who understands how to like, take this data and build pipelines to convert it into like what, a different system, like,
Yeah.
it's going to be okay. I think it's like the big, but I love that note about culture too, because if you got a really sweet tool that nobody knows how to use, then you're dead in the water. Like,
yeah,
what are you
it
gonna do?
happens so much with like C-level execs. So like a salesman comes in and sells the CTO on some cool thing, and like they buy it, and everyone's like, "What the fuck is this? Like, we don't need this or want this. It's not solving our problems." You know what I mean? I feel like it comes down from a lot of top-down decisions that don't involve engineers, which is pretty common. Yeah, I'm sure we've all run into tools like that. You're like, "What the fuck is this?"
Yeah.
I recently ran into one too. They're like, "We bought this. You got to use it." And we're like, "What?" Yeah, like, you got to figure out how to use this. We spent a shit ton on this license. Yeah, it was totally backwards, but whatever. I don't know. Whatever you want, I guess. Let's see. It looks like I got a different question here about multi-model. We can dig into that one too. So the question is, how should oh, it's here. What was it? I just scrolled up. When you say multi-model system, can you elaborate with a use case if possible? Yeah, multi-models, that refers to like the type of data you would be using. So like example, different models you could be saving data in today are relational, JSON, blob storage, or document storage like MongoDB, key value stores like Redis, time series data, geospatial data, full text search like Elasticsearch. Yeah, so those are the examples of using lots of different types of data. I'd say lots of databases are supporting multi-model. It depends, like some of them handle it better than others. Typically, if it specializes it, like a lot of databases, for example, support time series data, but how well they handle that kind of depends on the database and how the choices they're making. But I think most applications today are multi-model, or like, I mean, definitely broad systems of data. They're saving data in lots of different ways. Like, for example, I recently built like a blog service, and I built an authentication service for that. I was saving all my data in an RDBMS, and then I was using a key value store with Redis for saving the authentication strings. So like saving those in there, and like if they got blasted away, it's fine. It's not a big deal.
That's my favorite. That's my absolute favorite thing to use Redis for, is things like password reset. Like you like save some sort of key in your email. And I'm like, what's great about like Redis too is just like blow this thing away in 5 minutes. Like I don't care. Like I don't have to like build some sort of like cron job to like clean up my database at all. It's just done.
It's clean, it's scalable, it works well, and it's key value stores like are pretty simple to use. I mean, it's like a key value store is like a object, right? It just has a key to access it and then some data saved in it, which is fast and scalable. But it depends. Yeah, it really depends.
Well, I think the other thing we're talking about too is like even like something like GraphQL. So just really quick, Rachel and I had this discussion about SOAP versus REST versus this GraphQL. And I think what's interesting to me, I've been doing development for like 10, 15 years. I don't know exactly where the earmark is on that, but I got a chance to catch the tail end of SOAP, and then we got into REST. And so, for a lot of people, there's this first time they were experiencing transitioning off one communication service to kind of this other communication service of like how we make API calls.
Yeah.
And what's cool about GraphQL is that it's the idea behind it allows you to like interface with this like one query service that can go out to and be like, well, I want these things. And it can negotiate where it goes to like these different types of like, relational or Mongo or, key value. It can figure all that out for you, so to speak. Someone's, obviously there's a wizard behind the curtain, but yeah, I think GraphQL gets a special mention here.
No, sure. I love that too. And like GraphQL it's just an abstraction built on top of REST, right? Like we're making a post request or whatever to a single REST endpoint. It's an abstraction on top of that, and we're just like, it's fancy on that. And actually, I compare GraphQL to be like the sequel of API calls, like because with SQL, it's a declarative programming language, and I don't care what's happening underneath of it. We're expecting our database engine to be able to go out and get the data we need from it. Just like with GraphQL, I'm just saying, like, I want this data, and you figure it out for how to get it back to me. I don't care. Like and like now I don't have to know where it is, where it's hosted, the different authentication methods. We have a single entry point and single method, and the engine like helps us get the data we need without putting that burden on the application developers using that data.
Yeah, definitely a great question got brought up in here. What about the performance of GraphQL? Yeah, no, you're totally right. Like I'm not, there's no one is here saying like GraphQL is like a silver bullet. I don't think there's any silver bullets in anything we're talking about. But it is an option and everything to consider when you're.
And I love it too. Yeah, I help bring it to Best Buy too. It's really it's helpful, especially for massive teams. It's a lot of overhead if you're just doing a solo project, in my opinion. Which REST works great, but you start needing it. Like what GraphQL excels at is like making it easy for a team of front-end developers to not have to like be all the way up to date on API changes or whatever. You could just update the single endpoint with new data or whatever. Someone brought up a question about performance of GraphQL too. I want to make a broad statement about performance of everything that I think everyone forgets about is that anytime you add a layer of abstraction, you will pay a performance cost for it. You have to. That's with like, and it includes like front-end frameworks like React and Vue, right? Like the second you pull in a framework or an abstraction layer on top of whatever else, that's additional code that has to get run and rendered and pulled in and sent over the wire to the browser or wherever you're going. GraphQL is no different. It's more code and more like pipes has to go through. That being said, that initial cost of running it, you do have to pay, and there's no way to avoid that. There is performance costs you can get by doing like things like caching and other logging stuff on there too. Apollo has some really cool caching stuff that can do on top of GraphQL. You can do that with like normal REST calls too, but it just makes it a lot easier for application developers to utilize that, which can be helpful too. So the performance, like a spot, changes where you're at by adding that layer of abstraction in front. Anything else you want to say about performance? It can be really fast though, but you're adding abstractions. Yeah, I just love GraphQL. It's really helpful. Yeah. I'm a big fan of it.
And I think like anything, it's just the right tool for the job. Is it, when you slam in GraphQL, just to like say you slammed in GraphQL, then it's, especially like on the solo projects too. And I think that's kind of the trick is like figuring out when as a developer and you want to get into like, you look at your next gig and you're like, oh man, I really want to work at that place. And they use GraphQL. Then it might make sense to show that you have some proficiency, but when you're architecting something that hundreds of thousands of people are going to use, then the whole tech is not coming in technologies to slam in technologies, and that they're definitely thinking about performance considerations and they're fine-tuning that ecosystem.
Oh, Scott, that's my exact advice for this too. Like, if you want to explore it, go make your personal project, use it, even if it doesn't make sense, go for it. I think the skill is as you grow from becoming a junior to mid to senior to like an architect or like a staff engineer or principal or whatever, like is understanding how to build scalable systems for end users and your team and whoever. And that's another skill that's hard. That takes time and study to kind of learn that. But figuring out when that is like the skill of getting up to that level too.
Yeah, I think a quick plug. I think this is something that both you and I kind of talk about in all the channels too. It's like, I get asked this question all the time, and I'd love to get your perspective on it. Is like people ask like, what should I build? I'm like, anything. Build anything. But yeah, I guess any advice for people on like what they should be building for independent projects?
Yeah, totally. I'll curious about that, but like yeah, I agree. I just posted a TikTok the other day on this too. I think there's only one wrong answer, and that's to do free work for a for-profit company. I think that there's like in tech, I think that and like I see a lot of people who are like, they're giving me experience for free work. No, they're exploiting you for free labor. And there's a lot better ways to use your free labor than for a company that's making money off of your labor. So open source work, doing websites for your friend's shitty band. You can do an art project, do a hackathon, a new portfolio. There's like a ton of websites of like ideas for them, because honestly, it doesn't really matter what you build. No one cares. The only thing that matters is what you learn from that. And better yet is who you work with on that. If you want to work with some cool engineers, like great. If you want to like get in a company, like if you want to work at Google, maybe start working on Google open source projects. Like get in there and start schmoozing and working with those engineers so they know what you can do, and you might get a job, or it's just good experience, right? Good connections with that. I personally, my TED talks about this. I like building art projects with tech. I think that the internet is the defining characteristic of our generation. I think that people here in this meeting today we're uniquely positioned to explore that as an artistic medium, and I think that that's awesome. So that's like what I like doing, or digital humanities work. But it doesn't matter what I like to do with it. The thing that matters is like, what do you want to do, and making sure that you're not being exploited by it. I think it can be like overwhelming. There's so many different tech out there. I want to talk about that for a sec too. Like, there's just so many different things, Vue, Svelte, React, 3 million different databases. Like, I recommend like doing what you think is interesting. Work on like what you want to learn. If there's a company you want to study what tech they're using, maybe try to pick that up if you want. It would help you with the interview. Maybe, probably not. It doesn't really matter. Yeah, I think. Yeah, the thing I do though is like I just do one new piece of technology for every side project I do. I just like it's this. I'm playing long game of learning, not like a crunching thing. I'm also at a different place in my career, so I can like it's just I've been doing it for a while, but like that cumulative knowledge over years and years and years really builds up, and I just recommend getting into that kind of flow. It'll just take you a while to kind of get that breadth of knowledge back in there too. But
what I think exploring too, and I think this is such a common miss. I talk about this a lot with newer developers into the field, and I'm like you have to think a lot about just your experience as a developer and like what brings you joy.
Yeah.
And I think that so all too often people think like, well, if I work for this company, I will be a happy camper. And so like they are like, well, I'm going to learn. I know PHP always like slammed on the internet, so I'm just going to slam on PHP a little bit. I don't mean it. So you go learn PHP and you go to like this company, and like you just don't like actually interacting and doing PHP.
Yeah.
And I think, I think about this a lot, because if you would have told me 15 years ago that I'd be doing what I'm doing right now, I'd been like, I don't really like that. Like my degree is in game design. I know the game stack really well. That's where I thought I really wanted to be. But at the end of the day, like I just didn't like, doesn't feel as good as like building these systems that like, oh, like people are going to use this and it's going to be helpful, and it's going to like help push humanity forward and so it's like when you enjoy working in a technology, I think that's also important too, but you'll never know that if you don't like sample things. And I think that's like super important to like, you think you need to go like learn GraphQL to go work at company X, and you just hate GraphQL, then like don't like company X isn't going to make GraphQL any more appealing to you.
I totally agree. I 100% agree. And it takes time to do that. I do like that you pointed out, like, I don't like this. Great. That's fine. Also, I feel like no one gives a shit what tech you know as a junior developer. No one cares. The only thing that they care about is, can you learn the tech that they're using at that company? That may isn't true for everybody, but I'd say 9 times out of 10, no one gives a fuck. Like, cool, you learn the stuff. That's awesome. But like, if I'm interviewing someone and they're showing me the projects they're working on, I don't really care. Like, it's interesting what they chose to pick that, but like, I'm interested in like why, what problems they encountered, what they learned from that, where they failed, what was the hardest bugs they encountered. Like, I'm more interested in the learning process and like how they built that thing, as opposed to the individual components of it. Because like, we're hiring you as a junior developer knowing that you don't have that experience. I'm hiring you expecting that you're gonna be able to learn that on the job. I don't say everyone's that way, but that's how I hire.
Yeah, and I think really what becomes important that too is like, do you know, like beyond how you did it, do you know why you did it? Like, I think that's always like, so that's always the piece that sometimes is missed in tutorials, is that you follow along and you build this thing, and I sit down with you and we're talking about it, and like, well, why did you make that decision? Yeah. Like, well, it's because that's the way I learned how to do it. And that's a really rough answer to feel good about as on the other side of the interviewing table, because it's like, I want to know that, from a button click to database, did you know what happened between there? Yeah. And you can point to the different parts of that interaction through that event propagating through the system. Can you like talk to me about how that all that stuff happens? And like, as a junior, like it's going to be kind of high level and abstract, and that's okay. Yeah. Because you still show that you understand how it all happened. And I think as you get deeper in your career, you can get much crazier, deeper in the explanation. But I love that.
Where, I think it comes out too. I think that's where like designing data systems is an interesting question too. Like, how would you build this thing? Because I do think, I think as a junior, you're so in the weeds on the technical details of programming and for loops and all that stuff. It's hard to see the big picture. And like as you get bigger and more comfortable with that, you start to scope out a little bit more. It's a good indicator of like where you're at. That being said, it's okay to not know that right now either. That's totally fine.
And I totally think that's skewed because like everybody on the freaking internet, at least on LinkedIn, is talking about how well do you know algorithms?
Yeah.
Because that's what Fang wants, right? Fang wants algorithms because algorithms matter to, but like the other 95% of the companies out there, like we just need somebody who can hook this crap up. Like, you know what I mean? Like we just need somebody who could click the database and they understand how to do that, you know?
And that's most of our job. I even like me too. Like I'm hooking up different services and different tech to get them to work together and passing the data through correctly to render or show or transform the data somehow.
Yeah.
I heard someone describe, my old boss actually described like web engineers were just like making fancy forms and that's all we really do is.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, interact.
Yeah, we have interactive forms. We have some really fancy interactive, and that's a little different now. Like Google Maps is obviously, but even that's got a little form on the left side of the page too, right? Yeah, that's basically what we're doing.
So we are at 6:41, and I want to get to the question that I really want to hit. Like, let's talk. I want you to wildly speculate about the future.
Yeah. Good call.
I would love to hear your thoughts on where you think it's all going.
I'm glad you're keeping an eye on the time here. This is someone's got to do it. Someone's got to do that here. Okay. Yeah. Wild speculation time. I would love to hear everyone's thoughts on this too. But and again, this is just my humble understanding of like what the future of the web and particularly databases is going to look like. So we talked about like the past, present, future from like paper to how Facebook scaled to the single databases and then modern NoSQL to like modern databases. But what is it like? Let's see here. Where is it? Okay, so first thing that I think the dream of all developers, including DBAs or database admins, is to have a database where they don't actually have to give a shit about it anymore. Like, because like I'm speaking from an application developer's perspective, I just want to save data in and I want to get it out quickly. And I want to make sure it doesn't disappear or go anywhere or do anything weird. I don't have to worry. Like if I'm working in a project, I don't have to scale that up. I don't have to worry about the Reddit hug of death. I just want it to work. I think that's the dream of all developers. I do think that we're going to be moving that direction. I don't know how much you guys know about machine learning, but machine learning works on analyzing massive amounts of data and what has more data than a database. In like interactions, persisting the data, saving it, understanding use cases for it. I'm seeing a future where databases are going to be self-optimizing and self-healing and kind of just take care of itself, right? Like if a lot, throw an index on there, remove an index, if we're stop using it for a while, auto scale up if we're about to run out of space. Like I don't have to worry about that shit. Like I want it to like auto configure based on the needs and like of the application. I don't think we're there yet. I think we're getting closer. I knew like MongoDB had features like a performance analyzer too that would do that depending on queries, but it still needed a human touch to it. I think we're going to be moving there in the interim, but I do foresee a future where you can just throw things at a database. And I'm going to go even further with that too. Like we talked about multi-model today too. Like I want a database that auto scales, auto heals, and also can handle different database types for me automatically. I just want to throw things in a giant bucket, have it work correctly, and have the database figure out how to optimize for that data type. You know what I mean? I think that the future is, I mean, obviously, I think it's going to be cloud native. Like self-host is going to be great too, but like it's going to be like, I think going full on. And Kubernetes is great right now too. I'll actually be at KubeCon next week. I think we can move beyond. I already see a future where beyond having Kubernetes kind of manage your applications for us. Okay, cool. I see the future being data intensive too. Like, I think that data intensive applications can be the norm for applications, especially when we start saving and persisting and using more of our data. Machine learning is going to be consuming more data. Data engineers also going to be important. Like we touched on this earlier, the growth in data engineering is huge because we're saving all this data, but the data doesn't mean anything unless we're able to grow some insights from it. A lot of our machine learning models still need some help to kind of help form what it looks like. And that's the job of like a machine, like a data scientist or whatever too, to kind of help make insights or help the engine create that. Who knows if AI will be smart enough to like auto make insights. I don't think we're quite there. I feel like the expectations of AI have been a little broadly marketed, I think is the right word. I think we were promised self-driving cars for now, and where are they? You know what I mean? It's not where we were promised it would be. But anyway, it'll be growing up there. So TLDR, I think the machines will fully take over our database, and I think there's a future where there'll be very minimal administration of our database as it scales.
So I'm going to take this aside. I was thinking about this question all day today, and I'm going to go back to something I always talk about, and that is less about the databases, but more about data for just a second. So yeah. I think there's this like very contentious thing that's happening right now in the online ecosystem, and that is, we are using apps where we give up more and more of our data in exchange for the services. And like how far that goes, I'm actually really interested. And I think the biggest tipping point is the and I'm sorry for anyone's ever been in my class, I'm sure you're sick of hearing about this, but I think the tipping point is going to be these, and that is once we get computers in our glasses, it's going to replace the phones. We get like the augmented reality phone call, YouTube, TikTok, whatever. All of that's in here, and I think that cloud computing, I point to things like Chromecast and Stadia as being like a big perpetuator of this, of like we're doing cloud computing and we're beaming the results to a device. Yeah. And I think as we get the 5Gs, the 6Gs, the 7Gs, or whatever, the transfer rate becomes better, the communication networks become better. Yeah. But as soon as we get this, what ends up happening is that we go from Facebook knowing about where you're standing to Facebook knowing what you're looking at.
Yeah, in real time.
And real time and human behavior. And you're beaming it to the cloud, and they're performing real time analytics on that data. Yeah. And they're like, and so all of a sudden, like you think about how important heat maps are for websites and like knowing where people look. Yeah. Apply that to the world, and like that's going to be crazy. And I think that like opens up all sorts of like new app security problems and all sorts of new security considerations. But I really feel like that like this whole thing explodes once we're collecting data of like we know what you're looking at. Yeah. For how long, for whatever. And just the kind of databases that are going to be needed to support that kind of. And I don't mean to scare anyone. That's not what I'm trying to do. It's more of just like because I look at the good side, I look at the flip side of that, right? So like being able to have augmented reality surgeries, and that like basically there's a room that has all sorts of sensors, it's checking out and scanning your body, and it's providing a real-time overlay to your doctor who can like see through your body and like see the organs, or download a schematic to a building for a firefighter and they can look through the smoke where stairs should be or whatever, that kind of stuff. So I think
there's accessibility too. I think
oh my gosh, yeah,
helpful too. Yeah. There's definitely good things about it. You're right. It's definitely, but it will be exploited. I'm just going to say, I'm going to get political for a sec too. I think the only way to stop that is to pass legislation to put caps on that and make ethical. I think the Facebook leaks just this past week have shown that companies will only go to what's legal and they won't do what's ethical with that data. Passing legislations needs to be done. So
I think that's such a hard thing too. I think that I learned this. There are a couple key moments in my career where I'm like, I worked for or with an organization that I'm like, oh, like we've crossed like where I'm ethically comfortable.
Yeah.
And like but yeah, but it's still legal. I'm like, yeah, but like that's like what? That kind of stuff. And
that doesn't make it right. Yeah, right. That's the line is.
And what's crazy is that like there's also this other line that it kind of governs part of my life too, is like if you don't, somebody else will. Like that's always something we need to keep in mind. It's like just because you wouldn't do it doesn't mean that somebody else won't do, especially when there's money involved.
Yeah.
So I look at, when I bring up this future that I talk about, it is kind of like a little more of like a stopping it's important, but also understanding what happens if it happens is also important too. And I think this is why I study application security too, and like just understanding how that stuff works. So, but data is central to all of that. And I think I totally agree with your assessment of the future too. I feel like I think Kubernetes is such a cool tool, and I think that it points to a future that is really, really like machines are smart, they're making more decisions that we don't want to make. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, we're already handling a lot, which is amazing, right? Because Kubernetes is like this, and Kubernetes kind of does that for us. I want Kubernetes to help me know what my application should look like, or like I want the application helping me. My dream is to have like a Jarvis AI in my browser to help me design applications. I think Copilot isn't quite there, but I don't know. I don't know the ethical concerns that either, but like that's still my dream.
Copilot, for those of you who don't know, is a new technology from GitHub that allows you to basically, as you name methods and variables and such, it makes guesses about how you want that method structured, which is kind of freaky because it's like, so if you follow this naming convention, it's going to auto-populate the rest of the function for you. And you're like,
you can write a function like is even, and it'll automatically just write that a function that returns if it's even or not. Yeah, it's AI based on Git code that's on GitHub.
But as you pointed out, not quite there yet.
Not quite there yet. I want it to go all the way. I don't know. I still think I think this comes up a lot, like the no code movement, and like is engineering going to be a thing in the future? And I still think that there's still going to need us to solve problem points. And I don't think it's going away anytime soon, but anything that will help me do my job easier, like help me focus on like the interesting business parts of it instead of like managing infrastructure and writing boilerplate code. I think I welcome heartily. All
right, so we are getting close to the top of the hour, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. It's fall, so it's getting dark out a lot sooner. Questions anyone wants to wrap up with, feel free to sneak in, feel free to throw it in the chat.
Yeah, I also say too, if you don't want to ask publicly here too, feel free to hit me up on Twitter, LinkedIn, or TikTok. I have a Q&A feature. You can throw things in there too. I don't know, whatever you want to chat privately, that's cool too. But I do prefer public. That way everyone can kind of learn from the questions too. And if you have it, probably more other people do too. TikTok for the win. Yeah. I will say TikTok is reminds me like early days of YouTube right now too. It's just like we're figuring out this like tech talk community right now, but it's been really fun. We'll wait a second here too. Let's see. I'm gonna post a link to my links one more time too.
Yeah, just a quick plug too for those folks who are if this is your first Aftercamp, we have all the things. We have Slack. We do meetups. In fact, our next meetup is in a couple of weeks. I'll be talking about 12-factor applications. So Joe talked a little about cloud native. 12-factor app is just one of those like really good kind of concepts and to consider, especially as you're looking for as you're looking to move your career forward. So we talking about what the heck that means. And for the most part, what I find about 12-factor apps too is that most people actually are already like learning how to do most of the stuff, but we're going to formalize it and say these are the things that I think about almost on a daily basis. So
it's a really important
what's
the word, like concept to understand.
Yeah, actually there's a couple of really nice hits. I think the next one is 12-factor. The one after that's gonna be solid principles, and the one after we wrap up the year talking about data engineering, and then we might have a few peppered in through the rest of the year. But when I talked about, we're like, we really want a solid fall, and I think this is gonna be a solid fall. So
I love that.
Yeah.
If anyone has any questions about like DevRel, engineering, career tips and tricks, what's the best?
Yeah, I've got a quick question.
Yeah.
So you talk a lot about getting into open source projects.
Yes.
Today I actually cloned down my first open source repo and started looking around, and the code base is huge. So what would be some good practices for orienting yourself in a code base, and especially for something like this where it's going to be an hour or two here or there and not something you're devoting a lot of brain space to?
Oh God, yeah, that is going to be all over the map. It really depends on the open source project. Actually, yeah, that's tricky because like some projects are really well documented. The good ones have like a getting started guide that's like pretty more than just like a couple lines in a README. It's like project overview and here's what this component in this module does and why and all that stuff. It depending and it depends on the size of the project. Like cloning down, like let's say Postgres open source project, right? That's a massive project that's been maintained for like 30 years. It's going to be pretty intimidating to jump in. I'm going to post a link in the chat here. It's a website called First Timers Only. And these are a list of projects that have been tagged by the developers of those projects as being friendly for new developers. It's a great place to get into if you're new to it. And typically what that means is the developers are knowing that they're going to be getting PRs and questions from newbies. So they're going to be more patient than maybe some other projects that or like more willing to dig into, and they're probably gonna have better documentation. So anyway, the TLDR is, it's really all over the map. There's no easy way.
Yeah, but what I'll say to you is that that's such a great skill to like really get into, Brandon, too. Like it really, being able to like hop into the middle of something and be like, what the hell is going on? And like you start to pull up the string a little bit, you see all the other threads come up. Like that right there is such a great skill to cultivate, because I mean, like most jobs are like that, where you're gonna be hopping in, you know, take Best Buy, right? Like you're gonna be hopping in probably to Joe's code base from years ago.
Yeah.
And like you're gonna be like, okay, cool, like take the week and just figure out how it works.
Right. I'm gone. The developer wrote it's gone. I didn't document it. Whoops. But it's got to get fixed. Yeah, it's a bug. Yeah, you got to figure out. No, you're totally right though. It's a skill, and especially as a junior coming in, you're probably going to be doing bugs or smaller things. You're not going to be architecting, so you're probably going to be working in a legacy code base. It's like that's a skill you'll probably be working with for the next couple of years. It's not a bad one, but it's also not very fun. I'm not going to lie to you, but
and by the way, like to be clear, that most developers have been doing this for a while. They feel exactly the same way you do. Like they're like hopping, like, what the hell is this? What are you doing? Like, what's going on? I don't get it.
Who the fuck wrote this?
Yeah. In fact, I would say that most of the time, like new developers, and I personally, junior developers is such a contentious word for me. I like the word associate developer because it sounds better.
Yeah.
So for associate developers in general, one of the things that I want to remind them is like, look, my experience is actually largely the same as yours. The difference is the persistence factor of just like, I've learned to stick with things longer than I did when I was early in my career. Like I definitely got frustrated. I'm like, I'm stupid, I can't figure this out, with all this negative crap we say to ourselves. And then you have a minute where you're like, oh, that's what this is.
Yeah.
And I feel like you got to stick around long enough to get to that point. And so, you know, if you're looking at a big gnarly code base, there's like literally nothing wrong with you. Like it is a shared experience across every developer.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's your experience. I'm just saying, like, just that's when you said that, it makes me think of that.
You know? Might. I will say the other thing you should do too is ask. Like if you get confused or don't know it, ask on Twitter, create a new issue. It's who knows? And if you don't know too, or ask a friend, go to a company, maybe you could ask someone who's more senior. I don't know. It depends, but I'd probably like the first thing I would do is like open an issue and ask about how do I get this started, or what does this do, or I want to change this, or even there might be, if you're in there fixing a problem, you open an issue, or you find an issue that's already open, and you start having conversation in it. Like, okay, I'm here. How do I figure out this, or where is this? Can you give me a pointer in it? And kind of let that discussion kind of play out there.
You plug the Postgres project. I'm going to plug NASA and JPL. Have got some really cool open source projects that you can play with too. Those are fun ones.
Yep. Any other questions?
Yeah, I got like about another minute or two, and then we're gonna wrap things up. Sneak it in.
Also, great question. Love that. It's okay if it's not either.
Yeah,
whatever.
Okay. Yeah, everyone thinks about them afterwards. All right. Hey, really appreciate it. Loved having you.
Thank you for having me, and it's so nice to meet you in real life. Everyone's watching Scott and I meet each other after years of internet friendship live.
That's awesome. Yeah, if we head back to Minnesota, we should do like a Aftercamp live. And
I'd love that. That'd be so fun.
Super, broship. There you go. Thanks, Peyton. All right, cool. Well, thank you everyone for coming. Like I said, in a couple of weeks we'll be doing 12-factor apps. I definitely think that is one. If you have no idea what the hell I'm talking about when I say 12-factor apps, come check it out. It's super relevant to what's going on the web right now, and it's just good topic to be aware of. So thank you much, and I will see you all next time. Bye, everyone.